Welcome, everyone, to AURI Connect's Fields of Innovation, part of AURI Connect's monthly event series featuring updates on the work that AURI is doing to foster long-term economic benefit for Minnesota through value-added agricultural products and processes. I'm Dan Skogan, AURI's Director of Industry and Government Relations, and your host for Fields of Innovation. The AURI Connects program is hosted by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute in Minnesota. Fields of Innovation, with sponsorship from Bremer Bank, is focused on bringing together Minnesota's regional ag and food value chains to build capacity and successfully commercialize new crops and successfully accelerate the commercialization of new crop and livestock opportunities, including new traits for existing crops. Events focus on connecting innovation and market development with value chain partners. Fields of Innovation aims to build a strong ecosystem in Minnesota and its bordering states that will provide ag producers and value chain partners with new market opportunities. Remember that this event is being recorded and archived and can be found later at auri.org. Also remember that participants are muted, but you can ask questions through your Q&A portal on your screen. Today, we're here to explore the USDA Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities grant recipients in Minnesota and the initiatives that they are about to launch with this funding. AURI is pleased to feature several recipients to discuss their projects and how others in Minnesota's agricultural ecosystem can participate. This event is the first in a three-part series highlighting the complexities of emerging markets for food and agricultural products, incentivizing climate-smart practices. I'm happy to introduce to you our panelists for today. So please welcome Ashley McDonald. Ashley McDonald is the Interim Vice President of Sustainability for the National Pork Board. In her role, she works on behalf of the more than 60,000 U.S. pig farmers who are striving to tell their sustainability continuous improvement story. Prior to her tenure at the National Pork Board, McDonald was the Senior Director of Sustainability for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. She also previously served as the NCBA's Environmental Counsel in Washington, D.C. Also today, welcome Jared Knock with extensive experience in diverse regenerative practices. Jared assists AgSpire's clients to impact their supply chains through strategy and implementation of land use practices. Jared has 25 years of experience on the land as a part owner of a diversified livestock and crop farm in eastern South Dakota, where he raises cattle, sheep, hogs, corn, soybeans, wheat, oats, alfalfa, rye, and cover crops. Through the lessons learned on his own land, Jared is passionate about equipping fellow farmers and ranchers to enable greater resilience and functionality through positive land management and grazing practices. Jared's expertise has been further honed through his background in livestock genetics, seed sales, business development, and as a co-host of the Roots and Ruminants podcast. Also joining us today is Scott Herndon. Scott Herndon serves as the president of Field to Market. Prior to joining Field to Market in 2022, he served as the vice president and general counsel of the American Sugar Beet Growers Association, focusing on the regulatory issues that impact their industry, including pesticides, biotechnology, sustainability, and crop insurance. Scott has also served as director of global government and public policy for S&P Global in Washington, D.C. And he's also worked in the orange juice production business, started by his great-grandfather, for Louis Dreyfus Commodities out of Brazil, and for a citrus and cattle business in Florida. And then finally today, Cameron Wallace. Cameron Wallace serves as Senior Operating Director for Truterra, the sustainability business of Land O'Lakes. In his role, he leads strategy, marketing, commercial operations, and public-private partnerships. Cameron joined Land O'Lakes in 2015 as Director of Corporate Strategy and Business Development. Prior to Land O'Lakes, he spent 7 years with Cargill, including roles in commodity trading, strategy, and business development and commercial leadership. And once again, we'll go to questions when all four have presented today. So Ashley McDonald, we come back to you. Welcome to Fields of Innovation.
Well, thank you, and happy to be here and share a little bit about what we are doing at the National Pork Board on behalf of those 66,000 pig farmers. I'm going to start out by just showing a little bit of what we're driving at through the climate smart commodities grants, as well as our other efforts, which is we want to be able to measure and report on the progress of not only what we're doing today, but then all of the practices that go on the ground tomorrow and beyond, and be able to capture that. So we have a system developed called the We Care app. It's a data storage place online that we can either get individual farmer information into, or we can utilize tools that we have developed, which I'll touch on in a second. And pulling all of that together can, and if we can scale it, which of course is the effort we're on now, that we can ultimately talk about and share our story more effectively, both with our consumers here domestically as well as abroad. And so, if we think about it, one of the tools, and this is where the Climate Smart Commodities Grant comes in as well, is something we call the Pork Cares Farm Impact Reports, or in short, what you might hear as the on-farm reports. And we have invested checkoff dollars for the last 2 years to allow any pork producer in the United States to access a consultant that we use to put together their individual farm level report for them. And I'm going to show you some of that in 1 second. But this is really the heart then that goes into the climate smart grants as well, which is, we have to have a baseline of where we are today. And we also want to empower producers. One of the hallmarks of this program is that report and that data is theirs to do what they want with, market their product in a variety of ways. But also to be able to tell ultimately that story of the industry, both at the state and the national level. And so we think that is, again, extremely important and really the first step in what we ultimately want to do. And then I think, we build on all of this then to talk about the climate smart grants, and putting more practices on the ground and aiding our producers in doing that, whether that's through technical assistance and financial assistance. So that's really the ultimate goal that we're driving at, and that drives all of the work that we do on the sustainability team at the National Pork Board at this point. And so if we think about those on-farm reports, this is really what it looks like. And we already have 200 or so producers in the system that shows, really that through their current conservation practices, they have a really powerful story to tell. So if you look on that bottom left, net greenhouse gas emissions, a negative number, which of course is what you might call climate positive, right? And so if we can aggregate this information together, both giving the producers an individual report that they can utilize, but also utilize those aggregated numbers, we can tell a pretty powerful story. One of them that I'll just point out, and then I'll kind of move on to the next step in the climate smart grants. But the other thing I'll point out, because I think it's overlooked significantly, is the soil erosion rate. Through the utilization of manure as an organic source of nutrients on fields, we know that we can build the soil structure, we can retain more water, we can improve water quality, and ultimately hold on to more of that soil. So where the national average is 4.6 tons per acre is lost, folks in this program so far have an erosion rate of less than 1 ton per acre. And I think that's a powerful story when you think about the over 6,000 dump truck loads of soil that actually saved on that land. And those are the things that we need as agriculture to be able to say, right? Make those comparisons that really resonate with folks who are not on the landscape on a daily basis and are not as connected. So this is one step, right? This is the baseline report and trying to measure, and that way we can manage on our farms more effectively. But then we took the next step back in the spring of applying for some of the federal dollars, which is what brings us here today in the Climate Smart Commodities Partnership. And we really view those federal dollars along with dollars from our supply chain partners in Trade and Nestle to be able to then offer our producers that financial assistance to take that next step. Something I should have said earlier was the U.S. pork industry has a 40% reduction goal for greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And this is one of the ways we want to be able to capture that progress and be able to account for it within our supply chain. And this is one step that we have taken, and fairly new step for a trade association like the National Pork Board. So we see the grant as being able to expand our current on-farm reports program, and to be able to then take that next step of paying for practice changes. We kept it fairly small. We only received $20 million, and that was close to our ask. And so we're focusing on a 3-state area where we know we have opportunity, including Minnesota, Iowa, and Missouri. And again, one of the hallmarks of our proposal and what we're trying to do is to take an existing program that we know has merit and producers find value in, and to be able to leverage those funding pools around that program already, to be able to partner with the federal government to expand this program. And so we have some, ultimately our lofty goal of a 40% reduction by 2030. We know that this program will help us reach that. And then I'm excited, of course, to then be able to, alongside USDA, alongside supply chain partners like Nestle, to then be able to go out and tell that positive story of pork producers across the United States. And I see really the advantages of this as being both domestically with our consumers, but we have a lot of international markets. 30% of our pork goes international, and we can utilize this information also in a lot of developed markets to be able to talk about the improvements that U.S. farmers make, and share that story, and ultimately promote our product abroad. So with that, a fairly short and quick overview, and as Dan said, happy to answer questions here after everybody has gone. But with that, I am going to turn it back over and turn it over to Cameron.
Great. Thank you, Ashley. So my name is Cameron Wallace. I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about Truterra and our partnership for climate smart commodities. I want to start by just introducing Truterra a little bit. We are part of the Land O'Lakes Cooperative, and we are a sustainability program of Land O'Lakes that is truly farmer driven. We are one of 4 businesses within the Land O'Lakes system, and we operate through the network of local agricultural cooperatives and retailers through Winfield United. We also partner closely with the Land O'Lakes dairy business as well as Purina to work with the dairy producers and other livestock producers to ensure that we're helping producers and row crop growers implement climate smart practices across their operations. Talking more specifically about Truterra and how we work, our program has national reach. We operate through the local ag retailers of the Winfield system. Today, we have over 2 million acres in our platform, and over 53 local ag retailers. We feel like we are uniquely positioned to operate at a national scale and to help provide support and capabilities out in the country to ensure that growers can implement climate smart practices sustainably and in a profitable way that helps them improve their yields and their productivity as well. Our goal through our climate smart partnership with USDA is to continue to scale those programs, to increase the capabilities and access out in the field across the country, both in row crop operations as well as livestock and dairy operations, and also to increase financial support and technical support to help enable those practices and to enable the scaling of markets as more and more food companies are trying to meet their sustainability goals. The way that our USDA grant does that is through an ecosystem of partnerships. We're very proud to be partnering on this project with American Farmland Trust, the Soil Health Institute, the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, and over 50 private sector partners that include local agricultural cooperatives, technology companies, and food and ag customers. The goal of our program is to create truly sustainable markets for climate smart commodities, and to, over the 5-year course of the program, get to a point where the programs are financially self-sustaining. And through our work with local ag retailers, for example, enabling more conservation agronomists out in the field, simplifying the data collection process, improving the availability of incentives for long-term practitioners as well as recent practitioners. Through methods like that, improving the access to these markets for more growers, and improving the ability to create credits and insets that food companies can use to achieve their goals. The other important piece of our program is enabling access to these markets for historically underserved populations, and ensuring that the capabilities and support are more broadly available out in the country, and utilizing our national ag retail network to help facilitate that. So we're very excited about this program. We are working diligently to finalize our grant and to kick off our implementation of the project here in the next few months. So I will be happy to take questions once everyone else has had a chance to present. And at this point, I will pass it over to Scott.
All right. Thank you so much, Cameron. And thank you, Ashley, for setting a high benchmark for me to try to achieve, but I don't think I'll be able to meet it. My name is Scott Herndon. I'm the president of Field and Market, the Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture. And I thought it would be helpful to just give you an overview of who Field and Market is. And that part's pretty easy. You can see here our members, our current member count is 171. So we're growing, it seems like daily, but it's not quite daily, but we've added 35 new member organizations since January of 2022. And Truterra has been a longtime member, but AgSpire joined last year. And we're really proud of the partnerships we have through the agricultural value chain. And our membership is divided up into 5 membership sectors. We have the grower sector, civil society, which is the conservation groups, affiliate, which is universities, agribusiness, which is where Truterra and AgSpire fit in, and then brands and retail. And our whole premise is that no one sector can achieve sustainability on their own. So that's why we bring all sectors of the value chain together. And then beyond that, we realized that we need to do a lot of work as a supply chain entity, financing innovative solutions. And so we created an innovative finance working group, and that group spent about 1 year developing this report here called Blueprints for the Value Chain. And what they did, they looked at the entire landscape of innovation in agriculture and came up with 12 financial blueprints. And those blueprints were divided into 5 buckets, basically, of ways to incentivize the adoption of sustainable agriculture. And the first of those being blended finance. You could think of that as public-private partnerships The USDA Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities is a prime example of that partnership where there's federal funding matched by private funding. But this model has been around a lot. You can think about it, a toll road or something like that. That's a blended finance model. And then sustainable finance, where you could have a green bond or reduced interest rates for sustainable production. Transition risk sharing, that could be something like a crop insurance, buy-up or crop warranty. And then a pay for performance plan, which is very simply paying for specific practices or it's more about like if you're delivering a carbon benefit or environmental benefit, the ecosystem services, that's a pay for performance. And then we also spend a lot of time looking at land tenure and leasing incentives, because I think it's a complicated landscape, because oftentimes leases are year by year and sometimes longer term leases. Like who gets the benefits if a farmer is putting in the efforts to improve the soil carbon on the lands? Should a farmer get some of that benefit, or should that all go to the landowner? And so we spent a lot of time looking at that. And I would encourage anyone in the audience to go to our website and find this report. It's pretty comprehensive, but it's not so dense that it can't be accessible. And so the reason I'm highlighting this is because we use this as the basis for our USDA grant. And ultimately, we were successful in getting a grant. We asked for $79.6 million from USDA. We were allotted up to 70 million, so we had to take a $9.6 million haircut. And I'm sure, like our other panelists here, we are in negotiations with USDA. I am eagerly anticipating the day where I can speak about each of our projects in great detail. But our project has a lot of moving pieces, but we're in a good place with USDA, but we haven't signed a contract yet. And once we do sign a contract, then I'm going to be able to speak with much specificity. But I can tell you the general contours of our grant. It's divided into $15 million for Native producers, $15 million for Black producers, and then $31 million in phase one in different innovative finance mechanisms, and then a remaining $9 million for phase two, which would be new innovative finance projects, or potentially additional funds for phase one projects that were successful. And so, I think the length of time for our projects varies. Some of them started out at 3 years and some of them were 5 years, but we're kind of looking at everything in between, because ours is many different projects under an innovative finance umbrella. But we're excited about it, and we're excited about the potential impacts to Minnesota. I could say that we fully expect that Minnesota to be benefited from our project, but I can't give you the details yet, unfortunately. I'm not trying to be coy, but we just don't have the specificity of that yet from USDA. But I think there will be opportunities for additional partners to come on board, mainly in phase two, because as I said, we're holding back about $9 million for phase two for potential new partners. And that's my hope, that we get new partners for that. Well, thank you. So yeah, I'll turn it over to Jared.
Thank you. Like I said, Dan gave a great introduction to me, Jared Knock from Eastern South Dakota. And so we started a company called AgSpire about 2 years ago. And again, farmer rancher at heart. And we were looking at all the things that the rest of the world, right? So all the food companies and people with environmental concerns, we're all asking and wondering, how do we get farmers to do more cover crops and adopt soil health practices? And I live in a place that has a fairly high adoption of such practices, right? And so about 70 to 75% of my neighbors every year would use cover crops on some piece of their land. A big piece of that is for cattle forage. We're a heavy cattle production area. We've been using and putting manure on the ground for a very long time as a way to avoid commercial fertilizers. And so I kind of looked at it and I said, wait a second, what happens about those of us that are already doing these things and have been doing these for a very long time? And how can we make sure that people understand what we're even doing? So I set out on a journey about 3 years ago to try and find a way to connect the dots between farms and the ranches who have understood for a very long time how to create resiliency in their operations, and then communicate that and get credit for it up the supply chain into the food companies, into the CPG companies, and all the other stakeholders that want to see more outcome like what we're doing on the landscapes. So AgSpire, again, started 2 years ago. We started out of a company called Millborn Seeds, which is the largest cover crop seed company in the United States. We do about 3.5 million acres of cover crops seed sales every year, and about 250 to 300,000 acres of perennial seedings. But really, we are a segue in between the farmer and rancher and helping them understand what opportunities they can have, and then also working with the companies to understand how to engage with the farmers and put programs into practice. So the climate smart commodity application process was a good, timely opportunity for us to showcase some of our ideas and get them into practice. So there's 4 projects I'll talk a little bit about that AgSpire's involved in directly. And I guess I'll lead with what that probably means for a farmer or rancher to be able to be involved. So the grass is greener on the other side was a project that we did in combination with South Dakota State University. South Dakota State University came with a really comprehensive approach for monitoring, verification, and reporting. And we said, hey, we've got partners here, AgSpire, that can help with practice implementation and specifications on the ground. We got a Buffalo Ridge cattle company that was looking at trying to secure and label such types of products coming from these kinds of ranches. So we kind of put all this together. It's an $80 million award. And over the next 5 years, what it'll mean is we'll sign up 300 plus, probably closer to 500 individual cow-calf producers, sourcing over 80,000 head of feeder calves from those producers. And then we've got about 150,000 acres of regenerative seedings funded through the practice, right? So if you want to do a cover crop seeding, if you want to do a multi-species forage seeding, so think alfalfa, grass type seeding, or if you want to do a rangeland seeding or overseeding, all those things are funded at levels very similar to EQIP within the program. An AgSpire landowner advisor will help you with a grazing management plan, which is required for participation in the program to get access to the funding. And then through the process, you're then certified with a minimum amount of regenerative seedings for additionality, as well as a grazing management plan, a premium for producing the calves that come in from Buffalo Ridge Cattle Company to go into the supply chain to help other companies figure out how to get regeneratively certified feeder calves that can then go on to be a part of bigger pieces of their supply chain and feed yards and packing plants and ultimately beef in the store. There's about 68,000 soil tests that are budgeted within here, and so, which making it one of the largest ever, I think, comprehensive efforts to understand what goes on grazing lands. And this is eligible for not just South Dakota producers, but also all surrounding states. So of course, including Minnesota, as well as a pilot in the Southeast United States and in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. So the next program, which also has like I said, all 4 of these will have a direct impact on Minnesota. This is a program that we did with Millborn Seeds. So as there was a great understanding that there would be a strain on cover crop seed availability within this program, or within all these programs, because many of them do focus on cover crops. We worked with Millborn Seeds to put a program together that would allow the generation for additional cover crop seed acres to come online, as well as building out food grade models for these various commodities. So we focused on 5 kind of niche products in the upper plains and on Midwest: oats, rye, flax, buckwheat, and winter camelina. And those specialty grains and oilseeds represent an opportunity for increased crop rotation for farms, especially those that are kind of in more of advanced stages of soil health adoption. So what this looks like is a farmer signs up for a contract production for oats, rye, flax, buckwheat, or camelina with Millborn Seeds. AgSpire works with that individual farmer to institute a comprehensive soil health plan on those acres for the production contract year. There's a funding mechanism that funds a multi-species cover crop, because these are all kind of short season crops that make cover cropping a lot easier to implement. Within that, And then there's a premium attached to the production of any one of these 5 commodities sold back into Millborn seeds. And so over the next 5 years, we'll have about 240,000 acres of contract production in the area that will be happy to look for people that want to raise these types of commodities in their farms, and then add back into the system. And then also as another kind of add-on, we've got a biochar initiative in here. A lot of talk about biochar and its potential use as a soil health amendment. So 15% of the enrolled acres actually receive a complementary biochar amendment that comes with in the cover crop seeding for use on your individual farms. The other 2 are smaller programs that we're involved in, but both again have an impact here in Minnesota. So GEVO is building one of the, well, I think one of the first or the very first sustainable aviation fuel. So SAF, right? We used to talk about ethanol and biodiesel. Now we have SAF, sustainable aviation fuel. It's a different process than making ethanol, but for all practical purposes, for a farmer in the Lake Preston, South Dakota supply shed area, it's another ethanol plant. It takes corn and makes biofuel from that. It's about equivalent of a 55 million gallon ethanol plant. Ground has been broke. It's being built in Lake Preston, South Dakota, which is only, probably about 50 miles, 45 miles west of the Minnesota-South Dakota border. Their plan is to develop carbon intensity information on as many acres of corn production as they possibly can in order to lower the individual carbon intensity of the biofuel that's produced. So the lower that they can lower the carbon intensity, the more valuable that biofuel is. So that's their attempt and goal. So we're working with them to adopt cover crop, no-till, and other practices within that supply shed. Now that's primarily going to be in South Dakota. And there's a SIRE as another part of this program down in Council Bluffs, Iowa. But I'll certainly see some spillover into Minnesota since it would be within the supply shed for that corn market. And the 4th one is low carbon beef. This is a real full, very integrated program, I would say, that takes a whole life cycle analysis, so a bit more intense than the program that is being done with SDSU. So it'll be an opportunity for 20 to 25 ranches in the U.S. to sign up. They can be anywhere in the U.S. That want to take a very comprehensive approach from grazing management plans to regenerative seedings, which AgSpire is involved in helping to implement and fund within the program, as well as methane reducing feed additives, feed efficiency technologies on the genetic selection side of things, and all the way to installing solar panels for shade in the feed yard where the cattle get finished at. So with that, that is the 4 projects that we're involved in and what they might look like for a farmer or a rural community in Minnesota from an AgSpire standpoint. And Dan, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jared, and thank you to all the presenters. Some great information, kind of generating some questions, I think, about what's coming next. I'm going to start with Cameron and Scott, who both talked a little bit about the size of their scope already. And I think, Scott, you had 171 partners already on that slide. And Cameron, you talked about Truterra having 50% of the harvested acres already in the program. What does growth look like, and how difficult is it to move beyond where you are? I mean, there's obviously room for growth, but how do you approach that now going forward? And I'll let go ahead, Cameron.
It's a great question. I'll take a stab at it. You know, I mean, yes, we have a large percentage of acres across the country that are reachable in our network. To us, growth, though, is defined by how many of those acres are engaged in the types of practice changes that result in climate smart commodities and that help enable growers to access these markets. And today that percentage is relatively low. And so then, you know, we look at, well, what are the key barriers to adoption for a grower? And it comes down to things like, are the financial incentives attractive enough? Is there enough return on investment for the grower, for the local ag retailer? Is the data collection process too much of a burden? And how can we simplify that? And then is there enough technical assistance out in the field to enable growers to get the support that they need to implement these practices effectively? And so that's those three areas are big focus areas for us in our program to try and bring down some of those barriers to adoption and ultimately help get more growers engaged in these practices.
Scott, how about field to market with 171 already participating? Are they coming to you, or are you going out looking for them? How's your growth projection?
Yeah, well, so I think, we've experienced tremendous growth just in the past year. 30, I mentioned 35 new members, and I think that's dual fold. I mean, I think the USDA money has certainly helped, but we had 19 new members before we were announced as a major as a lead grantee. And so I think our platform is custom made for these kinds of programs. So we have 4.6 million acres enrolled in what we call our continuous improvement accelerator projects. That's across 36 states and 68 entities leading projects. So that's has nothing to do with USDA. That's just sort of traditional field to market projects. With the addition of the USDA money and sort of the global focus on climate smart projects, I think there's a lot more room for growth. I think we've experienced tremendous growth in the agribusiness sector. We just added Kroger Tuesday of this week as a major supporter, major member, and so I think there's a lot of room for growth. But we're actively trying to recruit new civil society members and growers, and so grower groups. We're kind of limited on commodity growth by the commodities that are in our platform. We currently track 11 major row crop commodities. So, we certainly are interested in grower groups representing sort of broad national interests. We have Farm Bureau, National Farmer Union, and others. But yeah, I think there's certainly potential for growth, and I am actively recruiting people all the time. But I think in the near term, I want to get to contract with USDA, and then I can go back out on the road again recruiting. But a lot of these things come up organically by I'll do these panels and people say, field to market, y'all been around for a while, what are you doing now? And people hear about what we've been up to, and they'll reach out. But certainly we welcome new discussions for members.
And here's one for all the panelists today. Are there any plans to incorporate renewable energy platforms to further decarbonize the supply chain? And Jared, maybe we'll start with you. Do you think about renewable energy when you put your plan together?
Yeah, I did. In fact, one of the, like I mentioned, there was a solar panel component to the low carbon beef proposal. And so, yes, and I know, Ashley, you've got some energy reducing technology as well in pork boards, correct?
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Yeah, so we a couple of energy practices we're looking at, and as Scott said, everything's still being negotiated. So don't don't take this as will absolutely be true. But yeah, we're looking at LED lights for energy uses, as well as now we're talking about solar and how we can do that. I think it's interesting to think about how they set up the federal dollars and the federal grants, as well as how these different grant programs are connecting into supply chains, and where kind of reductions, insets, offsets are kind of going, right? And we have, and so that makes it a little more complicated when we think about some of the renewable energy credits that can be developed by solar or other means too. So working through all of that, but those are two, thanks, Jared, those are two that we're looking at as well.
Cameron or Scott, do you want to weigh in on renewable energy?
Yeah, that's a particular interest to me. So we added Growth Energy, a trade association that represents the ethanol or the renewable energy field, and Neste, which is a Finnish biofuels producer. We added them as members. And so I think my dream is to start a biofuels project within our continuous improvement accelerator this year or next year. I think it would be really, really neat. I thought what Jared was talking about was super cool about, developing a sort of localized carbon intensity score. I think that would be really interesting data. And I think there's space for that potentially in our phase two, but we have not scoped that out in our phase one. But phase two starts 6 months after phase one, so it's a little bit of a misnomer to say, phase two sounds like it's going to be 20 years away. No, that's this year. But I should have mentioned that we are the lead grantee for one project, one $70 million project, but we were named as major partners in 5 other of the large pool projects and one of the smaller pool projects. And I think for one of the smaller pool projects, it is going to have a focus on sorghum and some biofuels component.
Cameron, how about Truterra?
Yeah, so Truterra is actively working on initiatives to look at how we can develop programs for sustainably sourced commodities as feedstocks for biofuels. As Jared mentioned in his presentation, there's a ton of opportunity there, and many of our local ag retailers have relationships with biofuel producers. So we believe that's a significant area of opportunity. The other thing I would highlight is on the dairy side. Many of our dairy producers are looking at ways to install digesters and be involved in renewable natural gas from that perspective as well. So there's lots of opportunities as it relates to biofuels, and as food companies look at addressing the full range of their emissions, obviously energy usage is one of those that they need to address as well.
Another one for all 4 panelists, and we'll start with you this time, Ashley. Are there any teaching or training objectives among your projects, and what needs do you see in your industry sectors regarding training and training about sustainability? Have you incorporated any training in yours, Ashley?
Yeah, the project that we're kind of administering here has a couple components around training. One is on the financial side. One of our partners, and I neglected to mention Jared Milborn Seeds is one of our primary partners, along with Farm Credit Council. And a piece of what they will work on is some of the educational trainings around how to make these practices work for their operation long term, and so there'll be some there. And then I think what probably most of our programs will include is technical assistance and training around the specific practices, what to expect and how to implement them most effectively. So yes, I'd say education or training is probably a major part in this one, along with probably most of them as well.
Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. So Field to Market, sort of separate from the USDA program, has an education workforce committee where its sole focus is to develop educational materials for our members. And so that's a key objective, and it's part of our 3-year strategic plan. But within our project, there's a ton of money dedicated to technical assistance and training. And I should mention that Truterra is one of our 8 qualified data management partners. And so that we have a relationship with them where they embed our metrics into their program. And so it's basically a one-stop shop for farmers. It makes it easier for data entry. And but for if some of those are not, our partners are not familiar with Truterra for their data entry or any of our other qualified data management partners, we're going to have to provide some training for the USDA Common Planner program as well, because I think for some of our producers, like they're not used to entering data through that, and USDA is requiring that as a baseline, and then everything else we do is sort of a bonus for reporting.
And Cameron, you got mentioned there, so I'll let you go next. And we've got a couple questions for Jared here back to back, so we'll put him on last here. Cameron?
Yeah, thanks for the shout out, Scott. We're working very hard to simplify the data collection process. The other areas that I would call out where training is part of our program is through our relationship and our partnership with the Soil Health Institute. There's a component of our program focused around developing soil health targets and improving the capabilities at the local level around soil health and around helping growers understand what are the relevant benchmarks around soil health in their area, and what actions can they take to improve it. Part of our program is also to enable more conservation agronomist roles out in the country and at local ag retailers. And so that's another component of training and capacity building that our program will help enable.
Jared, let's start with teaching and training before we go to the other questions, but do you have some incorporated in your project?
Absolutely. So AgSpire, one of the major components of AgSpire is our landowner advisor team, which is rangeland specialists, grazing specialists, agronomists, and other folks who have careers of experience in helping folks understand how to make these changes. So for example, in the SDSU project, every single participant will receive an on-site visitation by a landowner advisor that will help them with their grazing management plan and site and planning and seed mixture for their regenerative seedings in place. And so I would expect everybody involved in ours can feel very well taken care of and have someone very accessible to help them make those changes. It was a big part of what we believe in would make these projects successful.
Another participant question directed to you, Jared. How are you handling the documentation of climate intensity scores on crops going into aviation fuels?
So GEVO is handling that part of that project internally, right? So they have their own score, but there'd be, and Scott and Cameron probably know a little bit more about how many they're out there, but there'd be a number of different options of models that you could use today that would give you an alternative carbon intensity score for corn production on a localized field. Should that be allowed by the resource boards that are in charge of those fuels. So, the big driver is nitrogen fertilizer, land use practices like cover crops and no-till come in second. And then you have, fuel efficiency on the tractors and number of passes and that kind of thing as well. But there's certainly some impact that can be made on lowering carbon intensity of an individual bushel of corn. First low-hanging fruit is better nitrogen efficiency.
And then I just wanted to ask you how you selected, or what was the process to pick your 4 priority pillars that you shared with us?
Yeah. Well, it was just kind of looking at the market space, and we talked with a lot of different partners, and we just ended up with finalizing those 4. So I wish I could say there was a bit more of a formal process, but we just kind of scanned the landscape and then just kind of decided that's how we were moving forward.
Got a question from our participants today about timeline for these projects. So Cameron, we'll maybe start with you and just go around the table real quick. What is the timeline for what you're working on?
Well, the grant is a 5-year grant program. We are currently working very diligently with the USDA to finalize our grant agreement. We expect to do that hopefully within the next few months and kick off our work as soon as we can. We're ready to hit the ground running, and just have a few final details that we need to get ironed out with that agreement.
How about you, Ashley?
Yeah, I'll just tag on. So as far as the actual practice implementation costs go, in the same boat as Cameron and everybody else, right? Negotiations with USDA. The one advantage that we have is pork producers right now, because we start with those baseline reports, those on-farm reports. That checkoff dollars have been invested in the last couple of years. Pork producers can go ahead and get started in that today. They can go to porkcheckoff.org/sustainability and request their on-farm report, and so that'll be the first step anyway. For those row crop producers who are also eligible under the program that we're administering, that will just be as Cameron alluded to under his as well. That'll just be probably another month or so before we can get that finalized with USDA and be able to expend the dollars to pay for both those baseline reports as well as all of the practice implementation costs. So yeah, we are pushing forward as fast as we can, but for pork producers specifically, they have a bit of an advantage and can get started today.
And I'll jump back in real quick. My comments were specific to the USDA grant. Our programs are also already underway, and growers can go to truterraag.com and explore opportunities to engage with us or to engage with their local ag retailer.
Yeah, and I'll chime in as well. So anyone at any time can start a project within the field of market framework, and the projects are very customizable. Our smallest project is 300 acres, and our largest project is 1.2 million acres. And there's really no set formula. We want to work with our partners to help you all find the commodity you want to work with, the funding partners you want to work with. We'll help you develop that. But within our USDA program, we're kind of bound by the 5-year maximum terms that USDA has allowed for this. But we are itching and scratching to get started. I'll tell you that. Once we just get these contracts finalized, and there's certainly remains some work to be done before we get there, but we are working very diligently to get there.
Timeline, yeah, we're all kind of waiting for funding from these federal programs, but when they do get started again over a 5 to 6 year period, kind of from right now is when we expect. I would say too, many of these other programs vary. We have a much more staggered approach on at least 3 of the 4 that we're involved in, where we're actually signing up, a few people year 1, but then adding participants as we go, instead of having everybody sign up year 1. So expect the first year or 2 for there to be a lot of internal folks that are involved in the project, and then really a year from now when we're really seeking a lot of new additional growth into the program. So if it takes a little bit while to hear about a sign-up period, it's 1, because of negotiations, 2, because we can't start until we're done with negotiations, and once we start, we still have to iron some things out, and then we'll be adding more producers in the program as the time goes on instead of less. 1 is about unintended consequences, about signing up of a lot of folks now into practices because of the future eligibility for them to be in carbon programs that require their additionality. I guess I'll answer that. We largely are allowing for early adopters to be involved in these programs, but I think realistically, I know that there's a lot of excitement about carbon farming and carbon markets in the future, but from a farmer's perspective and someone who is engaged in a lot of these projects and looking at things, don't expect carbon to make your farm payments anytime soon. If you have the opportunity to make a practice change that is best for your farm and what you want to do, don't worry about exactly when and how, or if there's going to be 25% more money next year to do it versus this year. When you can take the chance to do it, just go for it. If it makes sense, do it, because I do not see carbon getting to the point where it's competing with our major cash crops as a source of revenue. That'd be my take on that.
Jared, I'll piggyback on what you said to just say the exciting thing I think about the number of programs that was funded. Well, that I'm worried about that on one level, but also that means everybody's trying to do something in a little bit different way. That I think opens up, and I'll just speak from a livestock and probably you too, Jared, from a livestock perspective, it's exciting because there are a lot of things we do in the livestock sector that are not in any sort of existing carbon market. For example, one of the things that we are looking at is we know in our deep pit systems that are a primary system in the state of Minnesota, if we can where somebody pumps their manure 1 time a year, if they would pump it 2 times in a 12-month period, that has a significant reduction on greenhouse gas emissions. And so if our little 3-state area, fairly small dollar project can incentivize that practice, we think that that's a little bit of a niche, right? Or filling a gap that might not be currently filled. And in my view, might bring a whole segment of agricultural producers into this space and into a system and trying out new practices that probably would not have gone into maybe some of your traditional markets. But the point is well taken, is yes, we have to be very upfront with producers as well about exactly what they get for it and what they might be giving up for it. And I think that is a key thing that all of us and so many of the groups that were funded under this Climate Smart Commodities funding opportunity have a very heightened awareness of. And we're working with even Trust in Food or Farm Journal right now on a catalog of all these programs, all these funded projects, right? So producers can find again, what might fit best for them. And again, we all have to be very in lockstep about being very upfront with producers so that they can make the best decision for their operation.
I know we're running out of time, but I would just add, I think this is an important discussion. I think, there's no one right answer or one right path for every grower. Every grower situation is a little bit different. Our approach from a Truterra perspective is to try and meet growers where they're at. And that's why our program has multiple steps and multiple stages, and provides opportunities for growers to engage at whatever level is right for them. Often for most growers, this is a multi-year process because you're probably not going to implement a practice change across your entire operation all at once. It takes time to learn how to apply it to your operation. So, our goal is to step through that process together with growers and through their local ag retailer, and over time determine the right path.
So I'll wrap it up for everyone. I just want to say again, thank you to everyone of our presenters for a great presentation today. And to our audience, a recording of the entire conversation will be available at auri.org shortly. That concludes AURI Connect's Fields of Innovation for today, presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. AURI's mission is to foster long-term economic benefit for Minnesota through value-added agricultural products and processes. Please join AURI on the Fields of Innovation Facebook group for future postings of events and interesting content. Thank you all for participating today, and we hope you'll join us in February and March for parts 2 and 3 of this series on Fridays, the 24th of February and March, where we will explore how the application of life cycle assessments can lead to reduced emissions and how reducing those emissions in value-added agricultural supply chains happens in practical applications. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.